Good afternoon to everyone. Well, first of all, thanks very much, Matthew, to have organized this symposium on Ultramarathon, and also to the Congress organizers of the CSEP. This is my first CSEP ever, and it's totally worth it. I'm really enjoying each single session, each single poster session, symposium, so nothing worse to say. Okay, in this presentation, we're gonna try to, I hope, to reply to this question, which is what's the deal with the running economy in ultramarathons? And as you can see, there is already a difference between the title. In the title, there is written energy cost, while here the running economy appears. So we're going to try also to provide an argument while we will talk about running economy and not energy cost. So just please bear with me for a couple of slides. To try to reply to that question, we first of all define and characterize what ultramarathon is. We're going to try to contextualize the ultramarathons. We're going to try to see what's the role of this general running economy in the ultramarathon, and finally reply to the question. So what's the definition of ultramarathons? We have a couple of definitions of ultramarathon. It depends on what we are talking about. If we are talking about distance, ultramarathons are defined as any running event that involves a distance longer than the traditional marathon. While if you are talking about time, and here there is just one definition, but we have many definitions. Running event is ultramarathon is defined as any running event exceeding 4, 5, 6 hours. So we may have two different types of ultramarathons. We may have events that cover a defined distance, 100 miles, 100 kilometers, and so on, as well as we may have races where the runners have to cover as many kilometers as possible within a defined time of 4 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours, and so on. As you can see, there's been a rising trend in the participation of ultramarathons all around the world. And here there are a couple of examples, but actually you can see that for one of the most famous ultramarathons in North America, there's been an exponential trend in the numbers of finishers in the last 40 years, while for all the 100 kilometers ultramarathons around the world, there's been the same exponential rise in participation and in the number of finishers in the last 20 years. But why we consider ultramarathon as attractive from a scientific point of view? Because some authors argue that ultramarathons can be considered an interesting and outstanding model to study the adaptive responses of the human body to both extreme loads and stresses. So why we also think that the running economy can play a role in terms of ultramarathons? Because the intrinsic nature of an ultramarathon is an ultra-endurance performance, and we know that the running economy is a key determinant in the running performance up to the marathon running distance. However, Guy and Martin as well, 5 years ago, argued that probably in the context of ultramarathons, the runners, in order to optimize other factors that may be directly related to the low-intensity endurance of these ultramarathons events, such as neuromuscular activation, neuromuscular fatigue, muscle damage associated with the ultramarathon itself. Well, to try to optimize these factors, the runner choose strategies that may lead to a deterioration of the running economy. And this is this was based also on the fact that a couple of studies showed how just the maximal oxygen uptake and the fractional of its utilization during the ultramarathons are considered or have been described as performance determinants. However, other researchers identify not just the running economy assessed pre the ultramarathons, but a mean running economy, so a kind of a variation during the ultramarathon itself, where they argue that while when this value is inserted in the regressional model, the explained variance can increase up to, the explained variance of the performance can increase up to 87%. So we still believe that, we still think that the running economy can be considered an important factor in ultramarathons. And we still believe that it's important to study the running economy in the context of ultramarathon for two main aspects. The first one is to try to optimize as best as we can the performance, as well as to try to understand, to better understand the limits of the human body. And as you can see here in this black picture, there have been a lot of studies, probably in the last 7, 8 years, that try to study the behavior of the running economy pre and post, or either during an ultramarathons. And as you can see here, they tried to understand this running economy, either expressing this running economy as oxygen cost or energy cost. We believe that there is already a kind of error in this different interpretation of a running economy, because of course it's not the topic of this symposium deal with the differences between energy cost and oxygen cost, and I just would like to say that Brian here, Jared Fletcher did a really good job in 2009 in kind of waking ourselves up and rethink about the fact that we should express the running economy as energy cost, because that's the real value. But however, if we tried to summarize, as we tried to summarize the changes, the percentage changes between pre and post ultramarathons in the studies that presented the running economy, we may have this kind of S-shaped behavior. So we actually are we are actually wondering what happened really to the running economy. We have negative adaptation of this running economy. We have a positive adaptation of the running economy, or running economy simply doesn't change after an ultramarathon. Well, the answer is still quite, say, confusing, and especially if we consider this kind of conventional wisdom that for running exercises shorter or identical to the marathon distance, the running economy typically increases, typically drifts upwards at the end of the task. And that's the reason why we recently wrote this opinion paper on frontiers of physiology, to try to, first of all, to reply to ourselves if the running economy really increases during or after an ultramarathons. And at the beginning, honestly, we tried to find a common way, to find explanation, to find a sort of answer to this question. But while we were working on this paper, while we were working and kind of having also brainstorming on the reason why running economy presents this strange S-shaped behavior, we realized that probably we should stop to think about why, and we should probably think about this, try to provide a sort of a call for standardized procedures to assess the running economy in ultramarathons, because we got the impression that we had a lot of issues and a lot of different methodological limitations that still prevent us to try to understand if there is a behavior, a common behavior of the running economy. So we identified particularly three different issues. The first one is the characteristic of the ultramarathons, then the number of finishers, and then the athlete's level of performance. As you can see, talking about characteristics of ultramarathons, we may have ultramarathons that differ from one from each other in terms of duration, in terms of the nature of the race itself. We may have a single stage ultramarathon, we may have continuous stages ultramarathons. Even the course elevation can change, so we may have flat races versus races with a positive or negative elevation change, and so we may have what is called mountain ultramarathons. But then we may have races performed in a cold environment as well as in a hot environment. The second issue is related to the number of finishers. Since ultramarathons, although there is this exponential rise in the number of finishers, unfortunately still considered a subsample of the endurance world or the endurance runners. And here there is just a quick examples. If you consider, for example, in the 2017 edition, we had around 40,000 finishers for the London Marathon versus around 1,700 for one of the most famous ultramarathons all around the world, which is the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc in France. The third issue is related to a sort of gap in the physiological characteristics of the ultramarathon runners. Although this gap is getting closer and closer and closer, we still have differences in terms of physiological aspect, in terms of what the endurance runners are and what the ultra endurance runners are. The final result is that if it's still hard to find a generalize or try to generalize what actually the sustained fraction of the maximum oxygen uptake can be, because as you can see here, can vary from 40 to 50 for 24 hours, for a 24-hour treadmill running, up to 80% of VO2 max for this type of ultramarathons. But then we realized that probably the reason why we had that as shaped in the running economy, it's because also a lot of studies from our group as well had four main methodological limitations in the way that the study designs were constructed. The first one is, again, the type of ultramarathons. Let me just give you an example. We have this subcategory of ultramarathons that is called mountain ultramarathons. These mountain ultramarathons, it's based on a graded level running. A lot of studies tried to identify or tried to study the changes in running economy during mountain ultramarathons with a level running protocol, when, in our opinion, a graded running condition should be the right model to study this type of performance. And the reason why, it's because from a physiological point of view, from a biomechanic point of view, even from the fatigue point of view, graded running, prolonged graded running is completely different from level running. And this is actually an example. When we had the chance to study some runners before and after 65 kilometers mountain ultramarathons, we decided to design a protocol asking to the subject to perform three different conditions: a level running protocol, an uphill running protocol, and a downhill running protocol. And these are the results. We had different behaviors. Sorry. There must be, okay, this should be the energy cost expressed in joule per kilo per liters, but there's the oxygen uptake. If roughly, if you consider the energy cost in joule per kilo per liter, so we had a significant change, a significant increase in the downhill running economy, in the downhill energy cost, while the level energy cost and the uphill running energy cost were completely unchanged between pre and post. Then we think that the second methodological limitation is also the individual changes in this running economy. We all know that to reach a mean standard deviation, we can reach a mean standard deviation with a lot of different individual changes. And this is something that happens also to our group when we study for the first time one of the most challenging mountain ultramarathons all around the world, the Tour de Jeanne in Italy. And we asked the subject to perform the before and after 2 different running protocols. The first one was a level running, and actually we saw that the energy cost didn't change between pre and post the race. And then we asked them to perform in a randomized order. We asked them to perform an uphill running protocol, and we saw how the energy cost decreased. But here we presented only the mean and standard deviation. So we kind of struggled for a couple of years in trying to understand if there was something wrong in what we've done, and there was something wrong in the statistical approach. And when we had the chance to test again the same subject during the same race a couple of years after, we didn't only consider the mean and standard deviation, the mean changes between pre and post, but we consider also the individual changes. And as you can see here, in the panel A, we have the net, the gross energy cost, while in the right panel, the net energy cost. As you can see, for 3 different uphill locomotion conditions, we had a sort of significant decrease, but then the individual changes, particularly in the net energy cost, was a kind of weird. There wasn't a common trend and a common decrease for each of the subjects that we tested. So we believe that since the ultramarathons present unique and specific characteristics, as we saw, we expected to have a higher variability compared to, for example, shorter distance runners. So we think that it's also important not just present and discuss the mean and standard deviation, the mean changes, but also understand what happens individually to each of our runners that we're going to test. The third methodological limitation is based on the familiarization session. We know that a defined number of sessions are required to familiarize the subject with the running treadmill, and particularly to the testing condition, especially if our testing conditions are uphill running conditions or downhill running conditions. And it's actually interesting because it was observed almost 30 years ago by Bruckner and co-workers that the energy cost, actually that one was the oxygen cost. The oxygen cost decreased as the number of practical sessions increased, leveling off around after 9-10 practical running sessions. So, since the running economy can decrease with the number of trials, then this is an indication of familiarization with the running condition, with the testing condition, and so on. This is something that should be searched by the investigators if they want to understand the behavior of the running economy pre and post and ultramarathons. And unfortunately, it's still quite unclear the procedures, if there are procedures in each of the papers, including ours, about how the subject were familiarized, or if the subjects were already familiarized. And the last one, it's probably, this is my personal opinion, probably the most important one. It's related to the control group. Although our groups, the groups involved in the ultramarathon study and so on, try to insert a control group while studying the neuromuscular functions, the running biomechanics, or either the skeletal muscle oxygenation. There are no studies in terms of running economy ultramarathons that insert the control group to study the behavior of the running economy itself. Generally speaking, we all know that the inclusion of a control group is definitely important. It's definitely important because it can reduce the biased interpretation, generally speaking, increase the level of accuracy of the experimental design itself. I think that we including a control group in the context of ultramarathons may reduce or try to minimize the phenomenon of regression to the mean, but this with a say ultimate aim to reduce again the biased interpretation of the running economy. So to conclude, we saw how the running economy can be considered an important factor in terms of ultramarathons, both from a performance point of view, but also to understand the limits of the human body. However, we also showed how there are equivocal findings in the behavior of the running economy. And this brings us to the idea that the running economy is still an open research question, but I believe that it's also a kind of never-ending research questions, because based on the nature of the ultramarathons, probably the generalization, it's impossible. So although could be less appealing from a scientific point of view, we should start to consider the specific behavior of the running economy for a 50 kilometers event, for 24 hours event, and so on. Just to conclude, I have to thank a lot of people, a lot of institutions, a lot of industrial partners that have helped me through these years. Of course, and I have absolutely to thank my supervisor, not just my supervisor, my real mentor, Professor Guillaume Millet, his brother, Professor Grégoire Millet, Professor Federico Schena from the University of Verona, who really give me the opportunity to start to study these aspects in terms of ultramarathons. All the Italian colleagues who have helped me in collecting the data, analyze the data, and being sleep deprived for the duration of the ultramarathon to try to study the subjects, and of course the subjects who were really will to be killed from us, not just pre the race, but especially after 330 kilometers. And I'm happy to consider them not just subjects, but real friends now. Thanks.
Thank you very much for a very stimulating presentation. We've got time for questions. If you'd be so kind as just to give your name and where you're from before you ask the question. So,
What I've done.
while people are formulating those questions, Gianluca, for your studies, what do you think the next directions are going to be? What are your next projects that you envision to help move this field forward?
If I will have the chance again to, well, now I'm in a kind of for sure, if I will have again the chance to study again the running economy, be involved in ultramarathons project, I will definitely insert a control group. It's actually a tricky consideration, because we should find a control group similar in terms of physiological performance level. But I believe that that will be the first aspect, and that will help to solve some other problems related to data analysis, regression to the mean, and other considerations.
Do you think it would be possible, perhaps, to set up a study that had its own race within the study, where you could have a control group versus a competing group, because where you go to the competitive environment, the logistics become more difficult?
Well, that's why I said that it could be actually tricky to find the same level or a similar level. I honestly don't know in a kind of real settings how to find we should bring athletes who are not performing the race, or ultramarathon marathon runners who are not performing the race, and ask them to perform just our pre and post, for example, control conditions. Logistically, it's actually challenging, not impossible, because nothing is impossible, but really challenging.
Thanks very much. And we were just asked if you did want to ask a question, please come to the mic, which is in the middle of the room. All right. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Jean-Christophe from Sherbrooke University. I must imagine that when doing an ultramarathon, there's a metabolic component, but also a muscular component. So I was wondering, what do you think the maximal strength of, the maximal strength component has to do with running economy after an ultramarathon, or the delta between pre and post?
Well, Guy here can definitely reply to your question in the next presentation, where I will say that there is definitely a change in the strength, in the muscular strength, in the maximal voluntary force, pre and post. This probably may affect the running economy. The point is that we are still trying to understand the relationship between a decrease in the maximal voluntary, in the muscular strength, and the running economy, and the changes in the running economy, if there are changes in the running economy. The point is that that's my personal opinion. Before be able to answer to your question, we should take a step backward and rethink about our studies on the running economy, in terms of all the issues and all the methodological limitations that there are. So try to control those methodological limitations, and then see if there are differences. Because we know that up to the marathon there is an increase in the running economy, and this increase in the running economy is partially explained by a decrease in the muscle strength. This is something that we cannot for sure say in terms of ultramarathons.
All right, thank you, and thank you for the great presentation. Sure thing.